Hi there, and welcome to the second season of the Humans and AI podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the real-life stories of the top leaders and entrepreneurs within the artificial intelligence, high-performance computing and data center space. These people truly are at the top of their game. We have honest and authentic conversations with all our guests. We'll chat about their career journeys, the highs and the lows, and the lessons they've learned from the mistakes they've made, and the victories they've celebrated along the way. It's all about sharing their experiences and knowledge. We talk about the company they're currently in and how they see the future of the space. So if you're looking for practical advice from people who've walked the same path, or just a little inspiration, you're in the right place. We're going to be releasing new episodes every Thursday, so make sure you stay tuned.
Hi Ash, good to have you here. How are you doing?
Pleasure. Good, thank you.
Fantastic. So before we get started, it'd just be good if we could just do a helicopter view, who you are, where you're currently working and what you actually do for them. And then we'll take it back to the beginning if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So Ash Patel, SVP of Business Operations for Nscale. In short, I'm responsible for all of the internal operational processes that allow us to run the business operationally.
Fantastic, perfect. Right, so obviously you and I have known each other for a long time now, probably over 10 years I think. So
15?
Probably 15, yeah, we're just getting old.
Yes, you just haven't learned to count yet.
Well, that's that too. So obviously we've seen the industry change an awful lot. So working for Nscale, Neo Cloud organisation, we've been around obviously before Neo Clouds, as the term is, actually existed. So you started out, if memory serves, as an engineer in the networking space. So let's just take it back a little bit to how you got into IT, why you got into IT, and then we'll work our way back to now, if that's all right.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, cool, I'll let you go.
So, well, just before engineer, actually, I was a teacher. So I used to teach at Uxbridge College.
Down the road.
Yeah, very much down the road. Started off with IT and then moved into sports science. Very quickly learned that I wasn't going to earn a lot of money doing it.
Yep.
So plan B kicked in at that point. Couldn't afford to go to university, which is why I went down the teaching route. So it was very much a case of, well, what do you do now? You're an 18-year-old kid, started to learn how to be a teacher and do the qualifications, funded, etc., etc. Quickly realizing that the next 3 years of your life are actually not going to fund the remaining years of your life, let alone the immediate 3 years of your life, I guess. So I took some drastic action, which my family were very much not happy with, quite frankly. And I went and worked for an organisation that allowed me to climb 150 metre high towers for the RAF, risking my life building very large wireless networks in the most remotest of places across the globe.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It was. Yeah, it was. I wasn't a very good climber at the beginning of that anyway.
I bet you were by the end.
By the end of it, yes, very much the case. So yeah, that's the beginning of the IT side of it really. So I went in and learned the hard way how to build networks, wireless networks specifically, before Wi-Fi was really a thing. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about we've been here and things have changed a lot. I've probably been through 5 or 6 evolutions of technology.
Yeah.
Before phones were really a thing, and then we can't live our life without our phone now, can we really?
We're starting to show our age now, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. I remember, the Nokia 3210s.
Yep.
Yeah. So that you couldn't really do much with them, but literally from that era all the way through to the birth of Wi-Fi, and now that's the norm of communicating and understanding information through the wireless channels, which we kind of take for granted now because that wasn't the case that long ago. We're all wired all over the place. So building these very large wireless networks was massively innovative at the time.
Yep.
People thought we were very crazy.
And you went from being an engineer to an architect pretty quickly in that sense, I think, as a wireless
so I learned the basics of how to network, and then from that very quickly moved on through the training programs that they have on understanding how to architect the wireless networks, but also do it in an environment that's incredibly pressured.
Yep.
Coming from an Indian background, it's also not necessarily the environment that is is kind of the norm for someone of my background, so it comes with its challenges. So you kind of learn the hard way across everything whilst trying to do a job, learning new skills, becoming an architect, and then becoming a very good architect that you can then take those skills and sort of move on in life with.
And you did, because I think you did something very smart. You moved into sales, didn't you, pretty quickly? So you've done the technical bit, understand what it is to be an engineer, to design a solution, and then that equipped you to go and actually start selling it, so to speak.
Yeah, it's more needs must, I would say, as opposed to intelligent, thought-driven processes. It was very much a case of once, I did a stint working for the RAF over time. Very quickly came to an end because I had an accident. I fell off one of the towers, and realised that that wasn't going to be climbing towers again.
I thought you said you become a very good climber.
I did. Yeah, a storm came in, and I don't know if you know physics, but if you're on a massive metal tower and there's thunderstorms around you, it's not the smartest of ideas.
Yeah, I won't be there.
So we had to quickly come down, and over time the towers build up with bird poop,
Mm-hmm.
and so when it starts to rain, it just becomes very, very slimy.
Another reason not to do it, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. So coming down very quickly, we slipped, and there's always two of you, a lookout and the person doing the actual configurations, but we both fell, and then I don't really remember much after that, but other than coming to the realization after recovering that I wasn't going to be climbing towers again, and I needed to make some money. So I set up a small business, helping customers move to the cloud, because the fundamental principles that I'd learned through that process was around multi-tenanted architecture, shared resources, and all the wonderful things that public cloud gives us today that back then was massively strange to the world of IT. Licensing and on-prem infrastructure was the norm.
Yep.
And anyone who had a startup at the time trying to build an infrastructure, it was very expensive. So I focused on helping those startups utilize shared resources, building multi-tenanted architecture, reasonably successful at that, and then along came Insight, because Insight wanted to build a cloud business, and I'd already done that. So they gave me the opportunity to really grow and scale, and then personally develop.
So you did, I think you were BDM if memory serves, and then you moved in and around the cloud practice, I think, for Insight, which is actually where we professionally met the first time in Uxbridge.
We did, yes, that's correct.
So with my last company, so I remember doing some hiring for you there. So you built that cloud practice, and then, what was the biggest challenge around that role? Because obviously working for Insight, well-known business, a new function, taking on board what is public cloud, and driving that growth in the organisation. Easy, challenging?
Hardest job I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Even compared to the climbing towers, quite frankly. Insight it's a work hard, play hard environment, or at least it was then. And you learn very quickly whether you're going to survive, and that's probably the best way to phrase being successful at Insight, is if you can survive the first year, then you've learned how to be a grafter, you've learned to understand data-driven decisions, you've learned to understand that it's a commercially focused entity first and foremost, and so it's goals, targets, KPIs, MBOs, and everyone is measured on those, irrespective of how good you are. If you're only as good as your last set of numbers, essentially. So you're forced to move away from thinking like a technical individual, and you're forced to think like a sales leader.
Yeah.
In short. And I remember the questions that we kept getting asked as a team, as a cloud team. So there was a software business, there was a hardware business, and a services business, and then my function became the cloud business. And every day we had to answer the question, Ash, this cloud thing, is it really a thing? Are people actually going to buy it? And these are licensing individuals that are selling EAs and making lots of money from it, moving and transitioning from selling an EA on a 5-7 year term to trying to sell consumption-based billing models that are billed in arrears. It's a very different, very, very different sale. It's more consultative, more solution-led. It's about the customer's needs and outcomes. And a lot of the individuals there just didn't quite grasp that. And so the biggest challenge wasn't just going out and trying to get customers onboarded to the cloud, it was also transforming the business itself to understand where the future landscape. And then, we talked about the wireless evolution. This became the next evolution of the cloud, and the cloud being the norm of the way to do things when it comes to technology. So yeah, it was really difficult, but you learn a lot. And probably the greatest manager I've ever had also was the president of Insight at the time, Stuart Fenton. And a lot of the leadership qualities that I feel I have now are probably instilled from him.
And he's gone on to do great things as well.
Yes.
I think over in Gentive now, isn't he? I think so. He's in fact, all I ever see is their marketing at the moment. So they're obviously doing very good work. So that's a good plug from you. So obviously working with Insight and creating that new department and that function, we see a lot of businesses that go to launch new products and services, and they don't always get it right. Now, we know obviously with cloud became huge. It still is huge, as is public cloud, as well as private. What sort of diligence did you do to actually make sure it was successful? Because I think people go in and build offerings, they don't really necessarily understand the need. It's because they want to. Sometimes it's a vanity move. What did you guys do to actually make sure it was successful?
We one of the key things we talked about was doing it differently. Not coming at it from a sales angle. So we didn't really build a sales function. What we did was we built a customer success function. We really looked at what the customer needs were, and we worked backwards from understanding the problems that the customers had, and how the tools and the technologies available through public cloud allow them to address those, but also grow and scale. And the target market was also key for us. We didn't focus on the large enterprise organizations that were very comfortable with EAs, and a lot of it at that time was Microsoft led, specifically for Insight as well. So focusing on all of those, it's a case of let's not try and win in an environment we know we're not going to win in. So we focused on the smaller organizations, we focused on organizations that weren't qualifying for an EA, an enterprise agreement, and we created an organic matrix of services and products that allowed a customer to land on the simplest type of service that addressed a very, very business critical problem today, that organically over time just naturally led them to cross-pollinate over the matrix of services. So whether it be vertically integrated services or horizontally integrated services, whether it started from email and then email security and then backup of the emails and then over time DR and HA for the infrastructure, or whether it started on the infrastructure side and moved more into security and storage. And it sounds simple today, but back then, these were massively innovative technologies to companies that were not used to using shared resources, where the security and software-defined components like networking are different to how they've ever done things before. That includes the people that are employed by those customers, because they don't have the technology and the experience in terms of their backgrounds to be able to leverage this newer technology. Yeah. The reality wasn't new technology, it was just a different way of consuming it and a different way of understanding how it fits your business, because you're able to configure rather than customize. So you're limited on what you can do, but those limitations can be a benefit. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the key difference. And that customer success function that we built out became a very successful team in that consultative approach, talking to customers, understanding their needs, becoming almost relationship partners rather than sales individuals. And that really helped build the reputation and the understanding from Microsoft's perspective that here was an organization that really knew how to sell cloud.
So within that role, you managed to build a function, build a set of products that you knew that customers would need and want. They just needed that sort of education piece, and you created that relationship team. But then you also built those relationships with lots of Microsoft and what have you, which then took you on to the next part of the journey.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, through that journey, I became fortunate. Was invited to become a member of the Cloud Advisory Board for Microsoft, and that really helped expand my knowledge and understanding of the Microsoft portfolio, not just the cloud pieces, but Microsoft in general, but also help provide feedback to Microsoft on how to develop and understand cloud technologies and how it can enhance the wider portfolios, but also become a prominent part. As we saw the transition away from on-prem to cloud become the main way of doing business, and also the main way for enterprises to start building their infrastructure. Legacy became a thing, and now doing it the traditional way was legacy, and doing it in the cloud was the norm. And so one of the key factors there was that I went over to the US and worked as part of the headquarter team with Insight. It was US headquartered. So I spent a couple of years there, and it got to the point where personal circumstances made me question whether or not the US was the right place for me personally. And so, unfortunately, we had some family issues, which resulted in me making the decision to come back home. And Cobweb came along at that time, which was a much smaller organisation, but an organisation that was focused purely on the cloud.
Yeah.
Whereas Insight was a very large corporate enterprise with employees everywhere that you don't always know everyone. And I really wanted to start working with an organisation where, to be like a Cheers environment, where everybody knows your name, and help grow the organisation and really be transformative in helping Cobweb go from being a small hoster to one of the largest players in the cloud marketplace for Microsoft.
Because it was a startup at the time when you joined, wasn't it?
I wouldn't say a startup, but they were a hosting business offering email, hosted exchange as a service fundamentally. But Microsoft released a program called the CSP, Cloud Service Provider Program, and it was geared towards helping Microsoft partners understand how to sell cloud and what the incentives are, how to generate rebates, and essentially how to make money from selling Office 365 and Azure and the related portfolio of services, such as Dynamics and the ERP softwares that Microsoft really was trying to push at the time as well, but was struggling because it was a complex workload. Whereas Cobweb was purely focused around the collaboration side of things, so email, SharePoint, security of those services. And I think there are probably 50 odd employees total, a few other contractors.
Culturally very different then from Insight, from that giant corporate. Obviously, it's taken you around the world from a work perspective to 50-person business. I think part of Level 39, I think, wasn't it, in Canary Wharf?
We were one of the 6 founding members of Level 39 alongside Revolut.
Yep.
We always used to fight them for office space, but we failed miserably on that one. But it was a good office space.
Because you had a transformational role there, didn't you? So part of your role was, I guess, to mature processes and help them sort of scale, I suppose.
Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge from going from that large corporate to a small 50-person business going through growth?
Resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, resources and mindset. With Insight, it was very much, like I said, it was about numbers. Mm-hmm. You learn to work hard, play hard. You're in the office 7 a.m, you leave at 10 on end of quarter days. So it's very much about the number. Whereas with Cobweb, that mindset wasn't quite there with all of the team. There was a commercial team there that were really driving that, but the culture of the sales-driven culture wasn't really there. And it also felt like a small family. Everybody knew everybody. It was down in Fareham, so we're not talking city culture either. And that was the biggest challenge: was how do I adapt myself? So there was a question: am I coming in as the person whose culture I need to try and pass on to the wider team, or am I the person coming in and I need to adapt to this culture? And that to be fair, that was part of the challenge of understanding where I fit. Do I fit? Don't I fit? Have I made the right choice? I came in off the back of a lot of success with Insight, with a bit of hype off the Register article that came with it, and the reality was I struggled working in a smaller environment, mm-hmm. where you're trying to drive change, and that change was very difficult to adopt at the leadership level. And you had, I remember the COO there was very supportive, incredibly supportive, and understood where the business needed to go, but there were others across the business that weren't quite there mentally in terms of the risks versus rewards that you need to have a balance of when you want to grow and scale the business. You know, the founder wanted to do that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is people fully underestimate when they come from large corporates what it takes to come into a smaller org, whatever you start up, whatever you scale up, whether it be just a small business that's looking to actually change and grow.
Yeah.
It is a huge cultural shock of a difference, and just, you say you understand it, but until you're in it, you don't really understand it. It is completely not what you anticipate it to be. And it comes down to your own resilience and normally sort of calm thinking on how you process that and adapt. How did you end up adapting in the end? Because you're right, you've got to bring people on a journey. You're not talking to 5 people that are exactly the same. So, you know, one's going to be easier than the other. But how did you actually end up turning it into a success?
You know, so understanding the psychology, understanding the human side of things was essentially how I adapted to that. And I learned that from, again, former manager, Mark Green. You know, one of the best individuals that understood how to be a leader through empathy. And when you've got a group of people that essentially work like a family and treat each other like a family, it's very difficult to try and get them to change how they've been working. So it's a case of, you know, understanding where they are in terms of their personality, what makes them tick, what you know, why they work for who they work for, what really motivates them to come every day and do what they do. And they're all very good at what they did. But these aren't individuals that want to go work for large enterprises, otherwise they would have. And they've been there for years and years. So again, change and moving and transforming is quite scary. So helping people go through the journey, but not from a sales perspective, but very much an empathetic human perspective, building relationships, creating a team ethos, helping people understand small steps, what the transformation will result in. And we started to do that using small steps. We brought in an organisation called Power 15 that helped us from a marketing and brand and PR perspective to really simplify the process of that transformation from being a hoster to being a major cloud player in the Microsoft ecosystem. And that, coupled with all of the people-related skills that you needed to bring to the table, really helped Coldweb gain its success. And we started to then see that organic change over time just through these simple steps of, you know, team building exercises, quite frankly, really start implementing and impacting on the business as a whole. So that was probably the big key there, was understanding the empathy of the individuals.
It's a journey, it's a process. So you did that role, you moved it forward, then you moved into more the alliances space. So you already had that relationship with Microsoft, you worked with them over the years, and then you worked for both, I think it was Rackspace first, and you also worked for AWS too.
Correct.
So you've built the 2 biggest players. I mean, some might argue GCP, but you know, AWS as you're in the cloud space, moved into alliances, having not officially worked in alliances before, but always having relationships, you know, with the cloud vendors. What was the decision to move into an alliances sort of role and be more front facing with essentially the partners?
I think it's, again, coming back to before, it's what you learn and the experience you take about what the next step of your career looks like, and where your skill sets best fit. And for me, over time, through Insight, through Rackspace, and through Coldweb, I built those key relationships at Microsoft, and then understanding that actually in that market at that time, the best way to be successful was to build what we called at the time the power of 3, and that was the relationship between the OEMs, the hyperscaler, and the service provider. You know, in this case, it was Microsoft, Rackspace, and then Rackspace's vendor community and creating that ecosystem and the synergies between the different partnerships that drove the sales pipeline and ultimately success over time. That intrigued me to the point where that's where I realized that the skills that I'd built up, I wasn't going to be a sales leader. I wasn't going to be a technology leader. But where I really sat was between the two, because I had the understanding from a technical perspective on how to build the infrastructure, implement it, migrate it, but I also had the understanding of how we go to market and how you sell the services. But neither one individually really sat with me as a total package. Whereas in the alliances role, being able to have conversations, being a thought leader, being able to have conversations at a deep tech level with solution architects, and then at the same time have a very commercially orientated conversation with sales leaders and commercial leaders, business leaders, finding that balance. The only place to do that was through the alliances roles.
And is that relatively unique to you in how you used your skills? Because so obviously we've hired lots of alliances people over the years, and they don't necessarily have the deep technical expertise that you come from. So is that more just a case of your individual background and how you utilise it in a role? Or is this probably a prerequisite to be really good at alliances and building those relationships?
I think going forward it's the latter. I think it's very much the case of if you have a deep understanding of the technology, you understand the go-to-market and its nuances in terms of how it differentiates versus its competitors, if there are any, or alternatives in terms of different ways of doing things, then you're going to be ahead of most other alliance individuals. And the key to success is being able to have that balanced conversation with whomever you speak to within those partners, whether it be the hyperscaler or whether it be a very specific OEM or whether it be a customer. And having that balanced conversation, one, I think it gives credibility, but you can take a step back and look at things holistically. You can see the bigger picture and ultimately the end goal. And if you start with the end goal and you work backwards from that, something that's driven into your AWS, working backwards approach, you really start to drive success through that ethos. And I think the alliances roles of the past, where it's all about relationship, is good. But I really do think that alliances role of the future and going forward, especially in this age where AI is really becoming the forefront of conversations, having that technical understanding is key.
Absolutely. And so you've got that technical understanding. You've worked for Rackspace. You've worked for AWS in alliances leadership roles. I mean, AWS is a beast, as was to a degree is Rackspace. To be fair, it's gone through some changes over the years. But you're working for large American orgs, very, very sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily work-life balance type environments. They work hard, play hard, go back to your Insight days. What was the biggest sort of, I suppose, win that you took away from your experiences across those two organisations?
So with Rackspace, it was a case of going back to familiar territory.
Mm-hmm.
I learned very quickly that I thrive under pressure, and in a smaller organisation, if you're not being pushed to the limit, for me, you're not delivering what you can. Just doing a job in an okay way is fine for most, but for me, the ethos and the culture that Insight drove into me and why I think I was successful there is because I work well under pressure. But I enjoy it. I like that feeling. And to be honest, if you want me to do something, I kind of have to have that environment to be able to be successful and do something well. Rackspace had a bit of a blend. It was, friends and family, meaning it kind of felt like a small business. You had to be a bit quirky to work at Rackspace, and you had to have that sort of human angle to yourself. As opposed to just being a sales-driven individual and a number-driven individual, or an extremely technical-driven individual. That's one end of the spectrum or the other. Rackspace was very much that balance, but you were always under pressure to deliver. AWS piece, well, again, trying to force myself to be under pressure. It's everything I'd done to that point was Microsoft. Moving to AWS was, let's see how the others do it.
Yep.
And they were the leaders of the market at the time when it came to infrastructure-led services for cloud. They were the organization to go and work for. If you could go through the interview process and be successful, that alone was a tick.
It is an achievement. It's one hell of an interview process.
It
There's
is.
no two ways about it.
Yeah, I think I had 13 interviews before I got to
It's
the
a
final.
full day at the end, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, for the final stage was a full day, and you're not up against anyone on the final day. You're just up against yourself at that point, and but you learn a lot through the process, and the leadership principles you attain over time by being at AWS. You either fit or you don't, from my perspective and my opinion. But again, that pressure to deliver results relentlessly, week in and week out, the requirement to learn every single technology under the AWS portfolio, irrespective of what role you're in, forces you to learn the technology. So having that balanced understanding is driven into everyone, whether you're a SDR in an entry-level role or whether you're a principal solution architect. You have to learn everything, and that's a minimum. So the standards that I walked into were far higher than I've ever had anywhere else, and that alone was a struggle. But what are the leadership principles of working backwards approach, thinking big? But the biggest one I took away from AWS and I hold dearly to today is disagree and commit. And in order for an organization to be successful, for a team to work together, you can't always agree on everything. But what you must do is disagree on what you don't agree with, but commit overall to the business goals.
Yep.
And if everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, if everyone is working towards the same goals, whether you agree with it or you don't, as long as you have the understanding of the why and what you're trying to achieve, you're a far more effective team. And that leadership principle at AWS is being invaluable for me. And where I'm at today, it's more prevalent than ever before, because that's how we've gained our success. The one thing I didn't like about AWS, though, was the working culture. It just, it works for some. If you are a single individual where work is your priority and you have nothing else, which is where I was at with Insight in terms of my life, it works great because that's what's demanded of you. You put AWS first and foremost. But if you have others around you and work is not necessarily the most important thing in your life anymore, then it becomes a struggle because it's not the most important thing in your life anymore. It becomes a means to an end as opposed to its life.
It's funny, some people do last in it and they do quite a good tenure. Others tend to sort of jump out at the share cycle or something like that. And obviously with AWS now they're changing 5 days in the office for the majority. It is a different business. It's a great thing to have on your resume or your CV, and it gives you a great overview of public cloud. Like there's no two ways about it. And you obviously could class yourself as at one point certainly a public cloud sort of expert, having worked with two of the main ones and certainly knowledgeable about it. You've then made a decision to jump into the neo cloud world, back into sort of private cloud. You put a great group of people together, engineering capabilities, commercial capability, and there was a lot of successes that you could take away from it. And obviously you learned about a completely different thing, outside of the public cloud. You came back into private cloud, high performance compute, the NVIDIA ecosystem and the different programs there.
Yeah.
And that has given you some incredible experiences and knowledge to move into what is now Nscale as the SVP or VP of Ops.
SVP of Business Operations.
SVP of Business Operations. Let's give a bit of a deeper dive into Nscale, what you guys are doing, the problems that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, no, very much the case. So fundamentally, Nscale is a provider of GPU as a service. In short, the infrastructure any organization would need to be able to build models under the AI umbrella. So whether it be inferencing, training models, computer vision, LLMs, and others. The key differentiator for us is that we have a fully vertically integrated stack. So from the data center to the plumbing, PM&E, how the data center runs and operates from a very sustainable perspective, to then the infrastructure that then sits in it. So the hardware, the servers, the software, the orchestration layer, the software-defined networking, and all of the applications and services that we can then deliver on the top end. So the fact that we're able to offer that entire stack means that we're able to provide a more bespoke, customized offering based on your needs, and at the same time, we then have the public cloud iteration of that as well. But because we're able to balance the two, we're able to deliver services to the market that aren't quite being able to be addressed by the hyperscalers of today.
So you've got data centers in the Nordics that you own. You've got co-location facilities as well. You're vertically integrated. In terms of where you're taking the business, obviously this time last year, I'm not sure it existed, or it was very small. Certainly you weren't there. You joined in April, May time, I think it was.
Correct, yeah.
Where do you see the business going in the next 12 months? It's been pretty rapid so far.
It's been a rocket ship, and it's also been the best place that I've ever worked, hands down. It's the group of people that we have been able to bring together are the most skilled group of people I've ever met. But more fundamentally, the relationships that we have, the team spirit, the working culture, it's been, you have to pinch yourself, to be honest, at this point in time, because it's very rare that you find that you get to work, come to work and you get to work with people that you equally call a friend as much as a colleague. But the level of expertise, the knowledge that we can share with each other, that everyone brings, it's incredible. We've been able to work remotely across the globe. We have individuals in Australia, Dubai, North America, a team in Norway. Everyone brings their own ways of doing things, and it's been really refreshing for us to all come together. And as I said earlier, you're not always going to agree, but that disagree to commit ethos. We've got the founder that's truly inspirational, and a leadership team that are incredibly driven, highly experienced individuals that are we have all the building blocks of an organization that will just scale and grow. The customers that we're bringing along with us in the journey, and then the future customers that we'll look to bring on board, it's not just the infrastructure that they're benefiting from. It's all of the above that essentially becomes an extension of the customers' organizations, that they'll benefit from that team spirit, the working culture, the individuals, the expertise, the knowledge. And that's incredibly unique. So quite frankly, where can it go? We label ourselves as the AI hyperscaler engineered for AI. Potentially just hyperscaler at some point, because you call it neo cloud at the moment, but at some point it just becomes the norm. At some point it becomes legacy. But when you've got all the foundational components to be able to address today's evolution of technology, but also potentially future evolutions of technology, and that's the key. So we're pretty much set for all the different kinds of technology that are going to get delivered into the market.
So who's the ideal customer, like the target customer of that, or what business should be wanting to talk to you about your capability?
It's all businesses, really. Any organisation that is looking at AI to enhance, improve, or whether they're looking at using AI to develop new ways of doing things. Typically, over the last few years, we've seen research institutes, academia, large-scale corporate enterprises, media players. But going forwards, in the same way that the cloud evolved and it became the norm, if you were running a high performance infrastructure, today you do it on-prem, whereas going forwards, you'll utilise the likes of your Nscales and others out there to leverage the benefits of outsourcing the infrastructure and the software to be able to use it on a consumption-based model, because it becomes more economical, and the economies of scale make it justify the business case for those customers to be able to then start thinking more innovatively, start looking at their R&D roadmaps and utilising AI cloud for their workloads over time. So today, it's probably a handful of organisations that are specifically working in AI. If we talk about manufacturing, pharma, finance, research, academia, but really going forwards, we are talking about the startups of today that are scaling out, organisations that today aren't thinking about AI because they can't afford to, but tomorrow they could, so they will, and growing over time.
I think that's it. AI is probably the bedrock of innovation at the moment in the tech world, anyway. Certainly, as I understand it. And I think if we 18 months, 2 years ago, we saw the rise of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Which I think people probably struggle to remember life without it now. They use it all the time, probably because it makes life a lot easier at work. So, but it has changed, and I think the innovation is going to continue at a rate of knots. And that's exciting, but maybe a risk as well. I mean, from a business like Nscale and other neo-cloud, how do you future-proof yourself when we're not even sure what's around the corner in terms of innovation? We know it's going to carry on innovating, but how do you actually make yourself fit for purpose, relevant, and continually being able to actually add value?
You've got to be agile, but you need the foundational building blocks to be able to be agile, so you can pivot against the market needs and the market demands. That is fundamentally why we are also fully vertically integrated, because organisations that are focused on any one of those layers, there will come a point where infrastructure becomes commoditized. GPUs will become commoditized, and it will become, as public cloud has, the race to the bottom in terms of price points. And your value add is now more in your software layers. But again, if you're just a software provider, you're restricted on where you can go, because the providers in the market will be tied down to power pricing, hardware pricing, physical space, data center, so on and so forth. And those limitations, although they apply to some degree for us, they are less inhibiting for that growth and for that innovation, because we have control over those different aspects, so we can cater for any of those components if they impact negatively in the future or positively. If we talk about price points of power, for example, if power prices increase, because we've got the design and the architecture in place that allows us to cater and cope with those fluctuations. We've got the team that has all the expertise that we need today, but also, more importantly, have the capability to learn more and want to learn more. So as technology innovates, as the world changes, as we develop different ways of doing things that today don't exist, that tomorrow will, I've got full confidence in the team that they've got the capability and the understanding to be able to enhance and embrace the technology that we work with, but the technology that comes along in the future, and apply it to our business model. And there's always risk and reward, but the mindset that we have has a perfect balance today, in my opinion, in terms of developing a working relationship where the culture is very different to a corporate culture, and it does feel like more that Rackspace friends and family and trust, but at the same time delivering on results, growing and scaling, and really having that commercial mindset to be ultimately customer-led, and we work backwards from what the customer needs and demands are, and that will dictate the roadmap over time.
So we're coming towards the end now. So obviously you're 9 months, 10 months into the journey, with Nscale. It's an ever-changing business. In terms of the learn, so obviously a lot of people that listen to this are in startups themselves or considering going into startups, may well even be other neoclouds. But in terms of what you've done over the last few months, what are the biggest learns or takeaways? So maybe even the mistakes that you've made that actually, learning from them to accelerate what is now growth. What is the bit of advice you'd give somebody else in maybe similar shoes to yourself that maybe 6 months behind the journey that you're in now?
Where do you start, quite frankly? I think growth comes from being pragmatic on how you do things, but not tied to how you do things. Being humble enough to self-reflect and say, what I'm doing here isn't going to work for the organisation. Just because it worked somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to work here and now. Mm-hmm. It might work in the future, but being able to change your decision and being open enough to be able to say, look, this whatever process I'm implementing, it might have been successful before, but it's not here. So let's not waste any more time. Let's just get the good team together. Let's just re-look at this and start again. So we've probably gone through multiple iterations of plans, different architectures. If we talk about the technical side of the business, different business plans, different go-to-markets. But it was really all at the very beginning. It was very much a case of we had an idea and we had a thought process around who our target market was. It just naturally changed over time, and in turn that means everything has to change. Your business focus, the type of people you have, the mindset you want, the ultimate end goal. And as I said, the ethos of working backwards from the customer needs, that's what changed, and therefore everything else working backwards from that changes too. And that isn't just never ending. So having that mindset of being open and saying, look, if something doesn't quite work, stop it, start something else. But also not coming in with the mindset of, this is what we did before and it worked, so it's going to work here. Not always.
So being agile, pivoting quickly, making a decision. And then you made a comment earlier on about AWS. So disagreeing and commit. Does that work in startup life? Is it, in fact, it could be one of the most valuable things I think you might have learned.
Absolutely. You need to get to a point of a decision, and you have to commit to that decision. In the startup world, you can have multiple threads, of course, of different business objectives that collectively come together. Microsoft had a North Star. AWS, we had the end outcome that you work backwards from. There is always that one end goal that you're trying to achieve. And in order to get there, if you're a smaller organization, you're limited on how many different threads you can run at the same time in parallel to get to that goal. And again, as I said earlier, not everyone is going to agree. But as a team, if you have the understanding and the justification to understand why a decision has been made, and you can disagree with the decision, because everyone has an opinion, and that's why we bring in a varied group of people that have those differing opinions, different backgrounds, different ways of working, different thought processes, different experiences, but collectively you come together to that decision and you commit to it, and you all work as a single unit in harmony. You're going to have a far better chance of achieving that goal than if you are a organisation where you've got pockets of teams working on different things. So that's fundamentally key in a startup, having that ethos and having that leadership principle.
I think that brings it to a nice close. I think the thing I've learned today from you and where you've been providing value to Nscale is that technical background that you've got, combined with your ability to work in product and to work in alliances and bringing all those together. Like you say, you're not a CTO, you're not a sales leader, but you're actually the glue that brings all these different teams together because you understand all the different camps and basically paving them to move way forward. It's a unique role you created for yourself, for sure.
Yeah, it's thoroughly enjoyable, and the best part for me right now is a lot of that's focused internally, to our internal processes. You know, how we manage our IT, how we manage all the problems most people don't really want to deal with, and it's outside of my comfort zone. But I'm thoroughly welcoming it because, again, it's pushing me, it's pushing the team, but it's empowering all of what I'm going to label as experts across the business to go and do what they need to do, what they're best at. You know, right person for the right job in the right position. You know, we use football teams as an analogy all the time, and as a Spurs fan, that's never a good thing.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but fundamentally, it's a nice thought process, having the right person in the right role for the right job, and having the ability to empower those individuals by removing as many barriers to what they need to do as possible. That's the really cool part.
Well, we'll have to bring you back in a year's time, I think, see how the business is going again. So I think with what you guys are doing at Nscale, it's one to be excited about for sure.
Thank you. No, very pleasure.
Good to have you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Ash shared his extensive journey through the IT industry, from his early days as a teacher to climbing up telegraph poles and to becoming the SVP of Operations at Nscale. If you're looking for more practical advice or inspiration from those who've been there and done it, stick with us. We're releasing new episodes every week, so don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us over on LinkedIn. This episode was brought to you by SVP. I'm the founder and managing director, and it's our mission to connect the very best talent to the most exciting scale-ups in the artificial intelligence, machine learning and data center space. Thanks again. See you next time.